Hi there, and thank you for clicking on my video. Um, this video is going to be a little bit different. It isn't going to be a video per se about Warframe, but more about the people in the clan that have been looking for different games. And over the weekend, I felt I was playing the Diablo 4 beta, and the reason why I'm making this video is because particularly the resource cost of being able to play the D4 beta was so high that some of the people in the clan that were not too many, but like there were a handful that were trying to play the game, they literally couldn't. And I guess it has a memory leak or something because I know when I was playing it, um, my computer was hitting like 18, 19, and sometimes 20 gigs of RAM usage. If it had been able to stay at like 12 to 13, like the average computer, I would feel has like 16 gigs as like a reasonable amount. Um, but requiring 32 gigs of RAM kind of puts a cap on it. And also, like, we'll talk about it later, hard drive limitations. So this video, for those of you who maybe stumbled across it, um, or are looking for a Warframe video about like a mechanic or a weapon build, this is not that. This video is going to be a Warframe player's perspective of the D4 beta if you are looking for maybe an alternative game to play. Because let's be honest, Warframe's kind of in a content drought and has been for a while. And the release system that we have is small updates. Um, and the tipping point for me was honestly maybe over the past 6 months to a year. Um, Warframe has become very busy in terms of the things that you have to do, how long you have to play them. Like the release, the for those of you that are just clicking on this, the most recent release was the Citrine's Last Wish, and the farm style of what they released in comparison to the one before. I think what like the Varuna was the one directly before where it had the pity system. I think the fact that the pity system was like whiplashed from something that was reasonable, where a person could get it done in like a couple of hours, to Citrine, where it's something you could barely do in a weekend if you straight up no lifed the game. And it was boring content. It was obviously a fresh take on the mobile defense, but the fact is you know because of how slow the farm was, they're gonna tweak those numbers later. And the philosophy behind that is kind of what pisses me off. You're gonna release content, gonna make it a brutal grind on something that's mind numbing and not interesting after the first couple of rotations. Like, it was nostalgic, and for anybody that played on those maps, obviously the Grenier tile set is still around, but the Corpus one isn't. So it was a nice throwback and it felt a little nostalgic. But that wears off after the 30th or 40th hour that you've run the same tile set. So I've been looking for other games. I know a lot of people in the clan and alliance are sort of in the same mindset. So this review is specifically for the people in the clan and anybody who finds it in the alliance that is looking for a game and wasn't able to run the D4 beta, because it's got a high mark to it on what's required, and it's not necessarily the graphics. It's the hard drive and the RAM that's the issue. Um, like just in terms of system requirements, because it will be relevant. I had the game loaded onto an M.2. Size isn't really relevant, but it was specifically the 7 gig bandwidth M.2. It was the 980 Pro. I have a 2080 Titan and 32 or 64 gigs of RAM. I don't know which one it is, but it's a DDR5 system, which I feel is going to become relevant if they don't massively improve like the loading optimization. So there you go, because this hard drive is going to be something I'm going to talk about. CPU wise, the game's fine, but the loading times and the RAM usage were brutal. And okay, so let's start with the basics. Basic review, we'll get the stuff everybody else talks about out of the way. D4 looked gorgeous. There's no real criticism you can throw at the game in terms of how it looks, especially once they updated and they released the higher quality textures, which I think is what the difference between the closed beta and the open beta was. Because I'm pretty sure there was a substantial size difference. And I watched some of the people play the closed beta and the open beta. It looked almost like a different game. Not really, but you could definitely tell when running on higher textures. It's night and day, especially compared to Warframe. Like, you see what I'm standing next to. This stuff would be like concept art compared to the quality that's in D4. Like this would be something you would throw down after like an afternoon's worth of work, and then you would go, okay, that looks good. Okay, make the real textures, right? Gameplay wise, I had no issues with it. It was very clean, very easy rotations. I didn't really jump around between classes because I was more interested in other stuff. But I know if I'm going to be playing D4, I'm going to be playing a Necromancer, and the issue with the Necromancer class has always been keeping the stuff you spawn alive, right? There was a broken build with the Necromancer class. I didn't play that. I went for as many Skelly Boys as possible. And they did hella damage. It was very easy to play the game and actually absorb what I was dealing with. Not gameplay wise, but in terms of like taking in like the mechanics of the game. In terms of, let's go over what was in the game versus what wasn't, because there was a lot that was is going to be in the final product that we know of that straight up was not in the game. The mastery tree was very, very simple. In Warframe, we don't have anything like a mastery tree anymore, and we haven't for a long time, like a skill tree. It was very simple, very straightforward. Warframe players aren't going to have any issues with this. Once you realize what the multipliers are, if you do anything even close to later game in Warframe play, where you're dealing with like crit damage, crit chance, faction multipliers, like synergizing with weapon frame abilities and like arcanes and whatnot, you're gonna have zero issue with the modding in Diablo. Once you realize where everything goes, you already have like the mental skill to easily tackle it. So we only got a beginning taste of like the gem set. We didn't get access to the horses. The dungeons, which are going to play a bigger part, I'm assuming if it's like D3, are going to be a more important feature later game, with like the torment system and the nightmare system. We got a beginning idea of what they're going to be, but in terms of like actually having an idea, of what the actual thing is going to be, we really don't know because we only had access to the basic skill tree. At some level, probably level 50, or level 25, whatever it works out to, because it looked like the skill tree that we had was incomplete. You will unlock the Paragon tree, which appears fucking massive, like PoE size. Like it looks like it dwarfs even Wolson's skill tree size. Or I guess PoE would be way bigger. Um, the only thing I can really say about this is I hope it's not one of those things where like, because even though Wolson had the launch that it did, and to be honest, it was kind of one of those things where it's like seeing a game launch so poorly almost made it worth it because you know a game couldn't do it worse. Pardon, had to sneeze. Um, so the issue is going to be the beta that we got to play was more akin to a technical beta than to like a piece of marketing that's meant to get people hyped. Because the game is basically going to come out in like 2 months. And the fact is I didn't really see enough in the game to compel me to spend money on like pre-purchasing. And I think that's part of the problem is like I would have liked to have seen like a single horse, maybe an example of like the base torment system where you can at least do the intro level, but we didn't get any of that. So all right, crafting wise, if you've played Diablo, um, it's the same thing more or less. You're gonna know how to do it, and I think that's gonna be one of the issues with D4. Um, is in terms of like innovating on new things. If there is any innovation in the game, it's gonna be at the parazon level, where before you had like the like literally just click to upgrade in Diablo 3. At least that's how it was when I did the Reaper of Souls playthrough. And I played it. I was never really part of the seasonal group, so take that with a grain of salt, what my opinion is. Um, but I hope this doesn't turn out to be one of these things where it's like you can brick a character. Because I know for me personally, that was one of my big issues with Path of Exile, is you can brick a character if you're learning in Path of Exile and you don't have anybody to like guide you through it and get you to a build. In hindsight, you basically have to have a throwaway character that you're just gonna learn on. You're gonna brick it. And then, especially if you're casual, there's no way you can farm up the Orbs of Regret on a casual player, or as a casual player, to be able to fix a bricked character. And I hope they make reskilling as easy as it was in the beta in the regular game, where it's just spend some coin and you just reskill, right? Just refund all. Even with the Parazon system, I know that's a bit extreme, but I honestly hope, because this game was pretty clear on who it was targeting. And this is part of the reason also why I'm making this video also, is Diablo 4, maybe in the latter system, but the game that we saw over the beta, it doesn't appear to be the type of game that is hardcore enough to scare off casual players it seems like it's a game a casual player can enjoy that won't bore a hardcore player. Where the hardcore player can still enjoy it if they want to get into that stuff, but it's still balanced and toned down enough that a casual player can enjoy it. Because the balancing, the game, it was a beta, it was imbalanced in terms of like what characters were strong. Um, like I would play the Necromancer just out of habit, but just judging by my experience personally, it was pretty clear it was busted. Um, I've heard a couple of the other ones, like the Druid, apparently got shit on. Hey, what are you gonna do, right? Like, hopefully they fix it. I mean, what else can you say? Interface wise, it was too simple. It was super polished, super clean. You know, UI wise, it looked great, but I play on a computer and it seemed like it was meant for phones. Like the buttons were big. Um, there wasn't really a lot of information you had to sift through. If you could see it, but you had to go to like a tab. Um, so definitely presents initially as like something a console player would enjoy, where they just don't have access to that many buttons. But I wish there was at least a toggle to get the more detailed um, views. And I even wouldn't mind like a full screen toggle, like in a menu, where I can see when I'm swapping stuff out. Um, I could see exactly what my stats are. Because one of the things I did like about it is the user interface, and this is going to be a weird statement, the user interface updates in real time. Like so, and this is specific to one of the abilities. Is one of the traits you could get on a weapon is if you stood still, you would gain a 30% damage buff. So I could check what my stats are, and then I could wait for the buff to stack over the period of time that it needs to stack all the way, and then I could see what my damage bonus is going to be. And I could actually watch it stack up. So I liked actually being able to see like the conditionals adjust, which is something that we do not have in Warframe. I appreciated that. It's probably in other games, but I liked being able to see that because we have things like Blood Rush, Weeping Wounds, Condition Overload, um, and in the modding screen, you can't see an example of what your damage is in the modding screen. You have to do the modding, or you have to do the calculations yourself. You have to use calculators or do it the long way, or at least be able to eyeball it mentally. But you have to know that math yourself. Where in this game, it appears it just shows you. And I liked that. Um, Warframe should probably have something where you could be like, oh, you've equipped Condition Overload, and you can set a standard of, oh, I want to see the damage with 3 status effects. It's like, oh, I'm using the Panzer, so I'm going to have viral on everything. My weapon slash weighted, so that's going to be my main form of damage. But I'm priming it, and I know I'm priming with like corrosive heat. So I have viral from the Panzer, I have corrosive heat on the primer, and I have a slash based weapon. So that's viral, heat, corrosive, slash. So I want to see, on average, my condition overload bonus with 4 statuses modded on the side, and maybe a little drop down where you can adjust it. But we don't have something like that. So for me, personally, I enjoyed the fact that you could see the stats adjust in real time for like a buff that you receive. Okay, so gameplay wise, it was like D3. The skill rotations were clean. Dungeons were beta. Lore wise, the more games I play, the more I realize maybe we got spoiled a little bit with Warframe in terms of how do I say this? I think as Warframe players, I think we got spoiled a little bit because we don't have many like quests, like the big quests. There aren't too many of those. And I think in terms of variety, as slow as it makes the content updates, the difference is that Warframe doubles down on the quest lines. So whenever we would get one, you knew for a fact it was going to be something different and something new. Now that really hasn't held true recently. But when you compare like Octavia's Anthem to the Sacrifice, uh to I forget the other one. Like you have like one where you go get like a Kubro. You have the one for Harrow. I'm forgetting it. You have like the old war. You have the new war. You have Octavia's Anthem. But when you look at like the variety in terms of breadth and uniqueness, how they really don't stack on top of each other, or you can't really draw a specific line or like theme to them. I mean, I guess you could, but in terms of like where they try to occupy, they really do try to occupy their own space or innovate on something or take an idea and do like an interesting twist on it. I think as Warframe players, we got spoiled because the quest line, and I'm going to try not to spoil this for those of you that are lore nerds, but it's basically in D4 two people that are like super beings get together in like forbidden love. They steal something in the past in one of the other games that's super special, and they make a place called Sanctuary. And then they have a kid, and then a bunch of other creatures breed together, and you create different classes. Everything is technically getting weaker for lore reasons. The guy in it like attunes this crystal, so like everything's getting weaker. Um, but the main antagonist kind of ends up just being, so far what we've seen, as like a compassionate mom. There's mother vibes, if you will. And I hope they fix that. Not in terms of it being bad, but in terms of like the further acts. I hope that isn't the angle they take. As like the defining characteristic is like something bad happens, we see it in the beta. And I hope it's just not an angry mom at the end of this, lore wise. I kind of always enjoyed having a bad guy that was just an asshole, and it was like a conflict of ideologies. Seemed like sort of one of the worthwhile peaks of like interpersonal conflict, if you will, where it's like clashing ideologies. And then you have the two people that are like the quintessential example or believers, or maybe they're the people that are trying to spread that ideology, and those people are clashing because of their beliefs. I viewed that as like far superior of a bad guy than somebody who is just trying to do something because somebody wronged them in the past. And then like, you know what I mean? It's just, we didn't see too much of it. It was just the first act. Obviously there's going to be more acts. We'll see how many. It should. I would be surprised if it's less than 5. So we'll see how it goes. But I really hope that's the whole mom issue doesn't become like the entire turning point of the game, like Diablo 4. It's just like a mom got mad, something very bad happened, and she's just angry now. So I hope they get off of that and move it into something else. But we don't know what it is. We know there's a couple of things where it's like we're moving towards something, but hey, it is what it is. Um, the cutscenes, as always, Blizzard quality. They're gorgeous. Um, you can definitely tell in Warframe that they're trying to up the quality of their cutscenes, though I wouldn't put Warframe cutscenes on par with Blizzard's, just because Blizzard is so much more polished with it. Not saying the Warframe cutscenes are bad, but it's just there's a difference between somebody that's making cutscenes at that quality for decades versus a company that's just now hit 10 years, right? It's just it is what it is. The cutscenes are way more nuanced. I like it. It's they're not necessarily faster or slower, but it's just they're different. Blizzard definitely has the cinematic aspect nailed down. The cutscenes are super powerful. They mean what they're supposed to mean. There's some hidden gems in it, and I appreciated all of it. Um, so it's just now let's go into the system requirements because this needs like its own thing. I saw a bunch of people because I was watching like Twitch streams, I was watching like YouTube videos on it, seeing like what people's reviews are, and I don't agree with the 4 out of 10 aspect because we didn't see enough of the damn game to really qualify it based on its whole thing. I mean, obviously it's a beta, so you wouldn't be able to. But the fact is that the leveling experience was just fine. I found it a little annoying that everything gets stronger with you. So you can be playing with somebody that's like brand new, like a level 1, and you could max out into level 25 in the beta. And you get into these weird places where I had like 11 skeletons, right? And I've got all these multipliers. I had like a ton of legendary gear, or like relic gear, and I forget what the name of it, whatever the orange gear is. The rare, not the rare gear, but the one above that. Um, and if you go back to like a newer player area, you could be sitting there playing with somebody and doing like an event, like one of the time-based events, and they're killing faster than you because the enemies that they're fighting against are their level and they're like level 2, just enjoying the game. And I've got a bunch of rare gear and I've got like gems and like sockets and everything, and like I've transferred on a bunch of like traits and whatnot onto like proper gear, so I've got everything boosted. 2-3 ranks enhanced on most of my gear, and I go back to like a level 2 area, and like the level 2's killing faster. I kind of wish. I can see why it's in the game, so I'm not too mad about it. But I sincerely hope that there's like a cap on that, where it's like only the beginner areas, like a new bro defense, right? Um, I don't know if I'm gonna be a ladder player or like a hardcore player, though I probably will have a hardcore character. But I don't know if I'm gonna be doing the seasonal ladders in Diablo 4. I was gonna talk about the system requirements. Okay, I have never. One second. I have never played a game where I felt like my RAM and my hard drive was the limiting factor for me enjoying the game. Um, I hope that they're probably going to optimize the hard drive issue. But my system was able to deal with it because I have the expensive M.2s where they have the higher bandwidth on it, and they're attached to a DDR system where I don't have enough stuff plugged in that they had the full multipliers on the motherboard. So it's a full DDR5 system. And I could see the game wanting a full 7 gigs of bandwidth off this hard drive. It was like 6.8 or something like that. So where I would see other people getting rubber banding, I got like a second of stuttering. And it's been a long time since I've seen that because of what my system is. I hope they figure that out because I could only imagine how painful Diablo 4 is on somebody with a regular disk-based hard drive that's not even a solid state, let alone an M.2, which is what I had Diablo 4 put on. So in terms of like a word of warning, if you don't even have a solid state, but you have a regular disk-based hard drive, until they figure out the loading times and that massive chunk of bandwidth that's required, you might not even be able to play this game if it's as bad as it seems like it could be. And I know that's mean, but if they don't fix the memory leak either, if you don't have like 32 gigs, they're going to be able to trim the RAM down. I know that for a fact. But the loading times, maybe do they parse out how much you load, because as far as I could tell, it was loading in the entire section of the map I was on. Like what the hell else would need 20 gigs of RAM? Now my computer was able to handle it, but like even on the 2080 Titan that I had, the VRAM usage wasn't that bad. But even locked at 120 FPS, my video card was constantly sitting at 80%. Now, it was a stable 80%. It didn't go up or down, really. But the issue is that if you're gaming on, say, not a 20 series, but a 10 series NVIDIA, I don't know what the equivalent is for AMD. What is that, a 580? I don't think that's right. You might have trouble with this game. Because I turned the settings all the way down, and the usage on the game went from like 80% to 60%. Like it wasn't a big difference. So maybe that's a beta issue, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of like a review, because one of the things about Warframe is that it scales incredibly well based on systems. You can practically run Warframe on a potato. So just saying, for people thinking about crossing over, or maybe having like a second game when Warframe's doing its I don't want to release anything product cycle, you should at least make sure that you have a decent system. It didn't feel too CPU heavy though. Like I have a 12900, and I didn't really see it go over 25%. It wasn't bad at all. But the RAM usage was alarming. And the bottlenecking on loading, I could see issues. Because like the main issue was going to be in terms of like, well, okay, a couple stutters, or say like a second or two loading in from one section of the. That's not a big deal. If you play on hardcore, okay, I was never a ladder player, or like a seasonal player that went for the ladder. But let me tell you, I would be fucking furious if I was a hardcore player doing like a seasonal run and you load out of a dungeon and your system takes 2 to 3 seconds to load or to catch up with the frame rate, and you're already fucking dead. If you enjoy that content and because they haven't optimized their game, you're dead because of how much bandwidth this shit wanted, like, I would be pissed. You know what I'm saying? So there is an issue, but that's a more hardcore player. Listen, we're Warframe players. We're a bunch of fucking casuals, and occasionally we do more hardcore game stuff. So let's just call it what it is. But if you do, like you enjoy doing endgame content, you're probably gonna do hardcore and like the ladders, and like the seasonal stuff. Just make sure you got that on lock. The M.2 with the 7 gig bandwidth on it seemed to fix the issue to where it wasn't game breaking. But if you've got something slower where you're rubber banding, Jesus, it might be time for you to get an M.2 if they don't fix that. Because I would be fucking furious. Load out of a dungeon and before you see anything, your character's already dead. Like even the little bit of hardcore mode that I saw. I forget which game it was. What was it? Path of Exile? Gives you the couple of iframes when you come out. It's like a couple of seconds, right? Because unless you're in an instance in this game, you're basically playing with everybody else. And to be honest, I kind of liked it. Like, I played a bunch of Lost Ark, and I liked the fact that as you were running through, you would occasionally see other players. And there's even an XP buff for being near people, which is pretty dope. Just like a little quality of life thing. So as you're running through and trying to kill everything, you actually are leveling faster. It's a nice little thing. Obviously, don't base the game around that. Like, oh, it has the XP buff. But it's just, the fact is I like being able to see other people, but then when you want to go do something, you kind of get your own area. Like when you're doing a dungeon, when you pop in a dungeon, there wasn't anything like a looking, like an LFG thing, looking for group. So being able to play with people, see people run around doing missions, the world boss, and seeing a bunch of people do that was super cool. That was one of my favorite things about Lost Ark. But then when you want to go do a dungeon, like you just pop into your own thing, same like Lost Ark, which Warframe doesn't have any, but I'm just trying to compare it. But one of the things I could see in terms of griefing, is if they don't fix the load times, I don't see any way besides giving you straight up iframes. Literally, just like 20 seconds of it. Maybe not that much, but like, you know what I mean? Like figure out how long it takes, and until you're loaded in, while you're loading in, if the game detects that you're rubber banding, you are in a permanent iframe state. Obviously not abusable, right? But what I'm saying is that, like, especially in hardcore mode, I couldn't imagine anything more furious than loading in, rubber banding, the game assuming you're in the other zone, but you don't have control of your character, and somebody else is like fighting a mob, and one of the mobs targets you, and because you can't respond because you're loading in still, you're dead. I mean, it could obviously be used for griefing, right? Just tag a bunch of shit, drag it over to the new areas where you know people load in. Or set it up so, like, mobs literally won't go near the loading areas. Like, have a bunch of, like, invisible zones by where you're going, where the mobs literally will just turn away. And set it so they, like, I don't know, like have like some marker on the ground so like everybody knows it's there. So if like you're trying to kite something that's really danky and it touches the specific area, it'll just turn away. You know what I mean? Because I could see that being a big issue, especially on people that play Warframe and they have like the slower SSDs. Maybe it's couple years old, um, or they can't afford it, or they don't want to pay for it. Whatever the reason is, they don't have it, right? But specifically on those older hard drives, I could see this game being a shit show because of those load times. Because for me, it was a couple of seconds of stuttering. It looked like I was like a stuttering video for like 2-3 seconds, and then it picked right back up. Where I saw other people get like straight up rubber banding for like seconds, and then they would just end up warping to like one of the town or something like that. If they couldn't walk into it, they would just warp in and just load in instead of running in. So that I think that's most of it, right? Gameplay wise, super clean. I think I will say this as sort of like a final note. I think everybody needs to calm down on the hype with this one. Unless something massive happens, the direction and the build-up that I've been seeing in this game, I know this is going to be mean, but I heard a metaphor recently that I've been using it a bunch of times because I've been using it so much because it's such an effective metaphor. It was some guy's opinion. I forget where it was, but I saw somebody watching the video of what this guy was saying where it was like unpopular opinions people would like fight you over. And I think it applies to Blizzard. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about like Blizzard's recent history. If you know, you know. Like everything from, I just don't see this product. I can't give Blizzard the completely trust-based pre-purchase. Now, say what you want about pre-purchases, but like until the past couple of years, if you were to go, like it's 2023 right now, if you were to ask me about Blizzard putting a game out in 2018, I would probably have just pre-purchased it. Right? Like Blizzard back then was like the gold standard of safe buys, of knowing you were going to get a good game. Like StarCraft 2, Warcraft 3 back in the day. Warcraft 2 was the first Blizzard game I played. I even went back and played the original Warcraft, but like Warcraft 3, that was my jam back in the day. Online was amazing. I got to play like the original online modded version of Dota, which is what Dota and eventually League of Legends came out of. But I was around for that stuff. And the trust that I had in Blizzard then versus what I do now, I don't know if I'm going to pre-purchase this. I'm probably going to wait for the reviews to come in, because I don't even remember what the last Diablo game was. Oh god, what was it? It was literally the shit show one. Diablo Immortal. God, see, that's where I'm at with Blizzard. Is what's the game? I think we are in the version of Blizzard that is post Diablo Immortal. And with the drama that they had, I think we just need to acknowledge that there's a bit of tone deafness that's going on. And maybe Diablo 4 is going to be sort of, not necessarily, I'm not going to say it's going to be like the savior, but like maybe it's going to be the first example of them getting back on track. But it's just post Diablo Immortal. I can't blindly give money to Blizzard anymore, because I know it's going to be a good thing, where it's like, oh, I'm going to be buying this product anyway. Hey, I might as well just pre-purchase it and get the extra stuff, the little bonuses, right? Because I'm going to be buying it anyway. I don't have that kind of faith in Blizzard anymore. Um, like there's been lots of cash grabs. We know there's going to be a battle pass system, um, which is its own thing. Like it's like, oh, if I don't log in, am I going to lose access to the battle pass? Say you buy a battle pass, right? Like for $20 or what, however it's going to work out. If something happens and the season changes or whatever the battle pass time frame is tied to, you lose the $20. Like I know that's like, oh well, it's something additional, you didn't have to buy the battle pass, but it's like even with Fortnite, right? If you buy the battle pass and you don't spend any of the V-Bucks that you get, you're supposed to have enough V-Bucks to buy the next battle pass. Was the way it was supposed to work. If they do a battle pass and I buy it, but then I get busy at work, do I just lose my money? You know what I'm saying? So it's like and then there's going to be the monetization. They said they're going to tie it to cosmetics, which is fine. It's whatever. I don't mind it. Like I'm a Warframe player. I'm totally down with cosmetics. Jesus, totally down with cosmetics. Um, but it's just I think everybody is holding their breath, waiting for the pay to win shoe to drop. Because Diablo Immortal, for somebody that doesn't mind spending money on games, Diablo Immortal was so pay to win, I was off-put by it. And to be honest, that happened a little bit with Lost Ark also. Is that there was this thing where the pay to win players, there were like, I'm not going to go too into it, but like there were bosses that you could fight on like a weekly rotation. Um, and in order to hit the very first rotation, you had to whale for it. So if you didn't whale or straight up no life, so it's either whale with your credit card or whale with your time, this leaves somebody with a job and who actually minds dropping $1,000 in a game. Like I know my most popular video is about how much I've spent in Warframe, but the fact is I wouldn't spend that in a fucking week. And there were plenty of people that would whale their characters up, and some people had spent $1,100 on a game they didn't even know yet. For me, I don't mind spending that, but it's got to be something that I trust. And I just don't feel like Blizzard has that right now. It's like they're doing cash grabby stuff, so it's like, oh, well, you know, it's getting hard to like assume it's going to be a good quality game and know I'm going to be taken care of and get a good product. I just don't see it. So I'm going to probably be waiting for the reviews to come in. I'm probably not going to pre-purchase. I didn't pre-purchase with Diablo 3. But that was like when I was in college. Like $100 isn't, I mean, $100 is $100, but $100 isn't what $100 used to be. So I could do it. It wouldn't hurt me any at all. But the fact is I'm just waiting for a bait and switch, because it would make more sense to me mentally for them to make Diablo 4, and then once the seasons start, or say after the first expansion, them to all of a sudden after a couple months start trying to sneak in those Diablo Immortal monetizations. You know what I mean? Like especially on like a ladder system, bro. It would destroy the game. Having a ladder system and pay to win, there'd be no point in fucking playing. It'd be literally who can throw money at each other. So the fact is that I'm gonna wait. I addressed the main issue hardware-wise, which is probably the biggest thing. It wasn't insanely graphically intensive. If you're running like a 10 series NVIDIA, you could probably tone the graphics down to where it doesn't hurt. But as somebody who's probably going to be playing a lot of Necromancer, I could see the effects getting a little overwhelming, especially if you start adding wild cosmetics. I could see it getting a little insane. Like Path of Exile's bad enough to where you can literally fill the screen with bullshit, but you don't have to watch it, right? Like you can turn that shit off. Um, at least like you can, throw a different cosmetic on and play by yourself. Um, but the fact is I'm just so worried about the fact that like you're gonna buy the game, you're gonna find out your system doesn't have the hard drive that it needs. Um, like I would really recommend. Like I've never recommend. Like normally a solid state is fine, but I really think if they don't fix the loading issue, I think this game, in order to be like truly enjoyable, is gonna end up needing an M.2 if they don't fix that loading shit. Hopefully they do. I know they're gonna fix the RAM issue, but basically requiring somebody to have 32 gigs of RAM. I mean, in today's day and age, I don't think that's too bad. But a lot of computers that people have, like if they have like a laptop, with a laptop, what? You get the option to double your RAM. It comes with like an innate 8 gigs in it, and you can throw like a 16 gig in. I mean, how many people are going to do that? But like my computer that I had before this one had was a DDR3 system, and it capped at like 16 because it only had 2 sticks. So if I had a DDR3 system, which would be like, what would be the equivalent? An i7 4790K, I think is the best in slot for DDR3 systems, the Intel. You couldn't even play this game, even if you had like my video card plugged into it. You couldn't even play the game because of how much RAM it needs. Your system, all the background programs, YouTube or whatever, would have to fit into like 100 meg just to make room for Diablo 4. So hopefully they tone that down with like some optimizations. But like overall, it was a beta if it was a normal beta and not a Blizzard product. Like I would have liked. I'm going to say something that's kind of mean. Wolcen did a better beta than what we saw for D4. And that's about the closest thing to a hot take as I'm willing to get. But it's true. Like, at least in Wolcen, we got to see, like, the infinite dungeon aspect. We got to see the enemy scaling. Even though we had like, a smaller map to run around, we got to see more of the player, like, skill tree. You got to mess around with it. And Wolcen, with all of its problems, I'm on, as bad as that launch was. Listen, I was completely on Team Wolcen until that launch hit. They basically threw out 2 acts and went, good luck, bitches. Like, the game didn't work. But Wolcen has been like the No Man's Sky of ARPGs. They've been buffing, they've been fixing the game. Act 4 came out. Even the boss fights, which was the high point of Lost Ark, was the higher end beasts that you had to fight, like the gods and whatnot. Wolcen's starting to take some boss fight tips from that playstyle. They haven't really dumped into it, but like beating the final boss was very reminiscent of some of the better Lost Ark fights. So and they even said on their most recent update, they're like, listen, we finally released the end game. We're not releasing any more lore-based content where it's like acts. And they basically said they're going to be doing balance passes and doing nothing but improving the player game experience. Now, obviously, that's probably due to like funding issues, but at the same time, for them to sit down and go, oh, I'm going to fight for the game. Listen, there have been some games that have turned themselves around. So maybe in like a year, Wolcen will be a significantly better thing. I even re-downloaded it and played it a bit. That is fun gameplay. You feel powerful. You feel super nimble. There's none of this 2 dashes on cooldown shit only because you got boots. No, you want to fly around the fucking screen like a maniac? You can do that. Play a rogue. You don't even have to change your fucking character. Just refund all your skill points and spec into it. You don't even need a different class. You want to play a sorcerer? Hey, make sure you got the equipment. Refund the skill points, spec into the fucking thing. You don't even need a different character. So maybe. But just talking about the D4 beta, if the game doesn't massively improve with the parazon system, Act 4 Wolcen, if Diablo 4 doesn't massively improve the game that we saw, obviously it's a beta, obviously it's a limited aspect, but if it doesn't come storming out of the gate with something monstrous in the full release, Wolcen with Act 4 is going to be better than Diablo 4. So I hope they got something up their sleeves, because we didn't see it. So anybody who gives you like a review like this is how good Diablo is, and that shit ain't come out and it ain't in June, they're full of shit. We just didn't see enough. Okay? So that's basically it. This video's gone on long enough. It's about an hour. Gameplay is good. It's normal. Crafting is good. It's normal. The UI, it looks like it's designed for consoles. So I'd like to see them maybe do like a PC only advanced user interface. Because I don't play console. That's probably the biggest thing, is that the game looks like it's a console port. It's got PC graphics with a console interface. So get that updated. Give us more options. It's just basically I have more screen space and I'm not looking at a TV across the room, right? So bring that into line. And to be honest, I don't mind the balance that they've taken. Path of Exile got too hardcore for a casual player to pick it up. Instead of having like a general gamer, like your average normie gamer, be able to walk into Path of Exile, mess around a little bit, and go, man, I actually really like this. And then turning into a hardcore Path of Exile gamer, you basically have to have hardcore gamers recruiting hardcore gamers from other games. Because, like, unless you're somebody that likes watching 30 to 40 minute breakdowns of a skill tree with, like, listening to the person's explanations about why they took this node, why they didn't take this other one, Path of Exile, in terms of, like, aggressive ladder system, seasonal runs, might not be for you. And Diablo has taken the point of being on the slight casual side. I think the best we're going to get out of this until the seasons come out is that it's a casual game that doesn't bore the hardcore gamers until the seasons and the ladders come out. In which case, go have fun being as hardcore of a gamer as possible. But the game would fundamentally have to change based on what I've seen so far, at least until that Paragon skill tree system. And again, it's the same thing. We didn't see enough of the game to accurately rate how the game is going to be. And then, you know, the cash shop in a game you have to pay money for is going to be a thing also. And then the battle pass, which of course you can spend money to skip on, right? So, it's a nothing burger overall. It's normal. There wasn't anything wild. There wasn't any like new mechanic or like something that, besides like the graphics and the artistry, that really distinguishes Diablo 4 from any of the other players. I think it will be kind of interesting as like a consumer. What was that meme? It's a bold move, Cotton, right? Jason Bateman. Diablo 4 is basically about to release a game. Like if you were, hold on, I'm gonna get MS Paint. Here we go. Okay, if you were to have PoE, right? Hardcore player base. Oh, different color. Hardcore player base. And then over here, you got your normies, right? Because Path of Exile really doesn't have too many casual players. About the most casual player that you're going to have in PoE is somebody that will just log in and go, oh, neat, it's season whatever. And they'll play, they'll get as far as they can, and then like life gets in the way, right, from gaming. Sucks. And then they'll just stop playing the season. And then they'll just come back on a new season because they know they can start over. Right. Diablo 4, and we'll go red for this. So this is this user base. Diablo 4 is basically trying to do this. And just drop a user base on top of Path of Exile. So they're going to have the casuals, right? Diablo 4 is clearly, as of now, until we see the parazon system, until we see the ladder system, looks way more casual friendly than PoE. But then the ladder system's going to come out and the seasons, and they're going to want this. And that's going to be the weird part. Because obviously the base game is fine. It's casual friendly. But once the ladder system kicks in, I think Diablo 4 might have the advantage. Because there's no way in hell Path of Exile is going to go more casual. They're not going to move in that direction. But Path of Exile is never going to go more casual. Diablo 4 would be able to maintain their casual player base, which is what they're going to get. And then probably uniquely expand into the ladder system. Not because they're going to be able to do it in a new way, but because PoE has already shown its hand in how it does the ladder system. And to some extent, Diablo 3 has seasons as well, right? So they could probably really do some damage. And I think it's going to be a pretty nasty fight for PoE. Because the fact is Diablo, if you get to go second and you know what the other person's hand is, you can change how you deal your hand to win against the other person when they already have their hand played. And literally, as long as Blizzard doesn't fuck this up, I think it's just going to end up in better content. If Blizzard is the Blizzard of old and actually trying to make good games, as soon as Blizzard tries to over-monetize, it's fucking over. People are just going to get sick of it. All of the hardcore players that were going to give D4 a chance are going to go right back to PoE. Even with the ladders, because people are comfortable with the PoE ladder system. And the ladder system in Diablo 4, when it comes out, will be new. So, it's interesting, but I'm worried about how this is going to play out, because it's just because Blizzard hasn't been making games at their tier that everybody knows they're capable of. And where they should have been trying to deal with their reputation by pushing out better and better quality games, they decided to do PR bullshit with it. So the trust is gone. They didn't go, oh, this happened. Damn, release a quick statement. We need to do better to get out of this. They went, oh, I'm not going to get into it. But the fact is that the consumer didn't win in that scenario. And that's really the thing about it. A lot can be forgiven if the company goes through some turmoil, say, with the Blizzard situation, and they don't say anything, and they just start making better games because of it. They're like, oh, we know we fucked up. Somebody here fucked up. It caused a lot of distress. We're just going to produce better games. Listen, gamers have really, really solidified memories on how you treat them. And the fact is everybody knows that in that circumstance, that shit happened, and then Diablo Immortal dropped. So they went, oh, we fucked up, and Diablo Immortal came out, and it was a complete microtransaction. I can't even say microtransaction. Didn't some guy spend $100,000 on that? Like, it was pay to win. It was brutal. It was not a Blizzard game, even though it was a Blizzard game. Do you guys not have phones? Like, talking to literally some of the most hardcore PC gamers that are loyal PC gamers. But I forget who said it, but maybe it's true. Diablo 4 might be more of a console game. We'll have to see how it goes. But the game looked super friendly to console players. Like, you've only got, 4 skills and 2 on your mouse? Like, that's not... For a company that came out with World of Warcraft, where you can have, half a screen filled with skill buttons, no thank you. No, at least give me 6. Come on, what is that? I'll keep the active cast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 can be my longer cooldowns for the boss fight and whatnot. For a game that's made by Blizzard, 4 skills, no thank you. The number of skills you needed were so many in World of Warcraft. Well, what was the Razer product where it had 9 or 12 buttons for your thumb? Right? Just for your skills. 6 skills, 4 buttons on your keyboard, 2 on your mouse for your abilities seems really, 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 really limiting. And I think most of the hardcore computer game players or PC gamers that are going to buy this product want something with way more abilities on it. Why can't you have keybinds for 10 skills, right? Because the thing is, and I'll make this the final thing, right? Because of the armor pieces that you get, you can easily get skills that you don't spec into. Everybody's familiar with it. So say you corpse explosion, right? You can not skill tree into corpse explosion, but pick up a piece of armor that's +1 to corpse explosion, or +1 to the skill level of corpse explosion, and now all of a sudden you have corpse explosion. Except if you have 4 skills, a basic attack, and it's a essence generating ability and an essence costing ability on your mouse, you can't use it. So there were times where it was oh, I got this weird piece of armor where it has skill points in 2 things, and I didn't have either of them, but it had a really good suffix. So I used it anyway, but I couldn't use any of the other stats. And I had to roll one of them off. So I think for the 4 skill thing plus the 2 others is so clearly designed at grabbing console players. I think they just literally need to just make a different thing for PC players and just let everybody play in their own zone. Because 4 skills was this Warframe, but like even Warframe has more, right? I mean, obviously, if you consider the ones on your operator, but 4 is a little silly in a game where you have like that many skills and like skill trees, and then you're gonna have the parazon system. But anyway, don't trust the reviews. People complaining about like the gameplay and whatnot. The gameplay was clean, um, but they just didn't do enough in the beta to give us like an accurate understanding of what the game is. Um, and I think that's its own sort of like little circle of hell, to go with the theme. Um, because we don't have enough information to go on to accurately assess what the game is. We got 1 act and a bunch of capped abilities. Like, even if they had just been like, okay, complete act 1, you get 1 horse, so you know what the horse riding mechanics are, and then there's 1 infinite dungeon, and you can go farm rares there, and you get access to all of the suffixes on your legendary equipment, the orange equipment. And if they had just done something like that, where you could like start specking into the parazon, but parazon tree, but like it wasn't a completed parazon tree, but so we can actually see what's going on with that, I think it would have been a way better marketing opportunity. But I guess they were doing like a technical beta where it's like to see if the game would run. Because we just, there's so many late game systems we didn't get to see. But anyway, rant over. I hope this helps. It was a little long. I tried to cover everything, but it's just, you can't trust the reviews. People saying it's like a 4 out of 10. The gameplay was fine. There's some odd system requirements, and I brought them up. So, anyway, later, dudes.